Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to another weekly episode of Everything Vaguely Paranormal. As always, I am Blake Smith, and with me are my partners in the paranormal, Miss Shelley Pruitt and Mr. Ryan Roberts. How we doing, y'all?
I'm
Super
doing great.
excited, and I don't plan on talking much because this is all about Ryan's. This is Ryan's alley. I think we should rename the podcast episode Ryan's Alley.
Ryan's alley.
Yeah, pretty much.
Ryan's got about 800 questions. Ryan's knocking all over his camera all over the
He's
place
so
right now.
excited.
But
He's knocking things down.
he got about 800 questions that he's going to ask tonight, I'm sure. This is his subject that he loves to talk about. Ryan, don't get so excited, man. It's okay.
No, man. Yeah, I know. I'm very excited. Sorry, guys.
What can we say? Welcome to a live show. It's all good.
Right.
We're not going to waste any time. I want to get right to it because we have an amazing special guest tonight. He is no stranger to accomplishments. I'll go ahead and say that. He is an author, researcher, and filmmaker. His best-selling books include A Walk in the Shadows and Alaska's Mysterious Triangle. He has been featured on shows such as Ancient Aliens, The Unexplained, and Fright Club, among others. He is the producer and director of the docuseries A Shadow Dimension and also hosts the live stream show The Edge of the Rabbit Hole in the interactive class Connecting the Universe, while operating his production company, Haunted Road Media. And tonight, we're here to talk about his newest best-selling book, Travels Through Time, Inside the Fourth Dimension, Time Travel, and Stacked Time Theories. So y'all get ready. But in the meantime, let's welcome to the screen our very special guest, Mike Ricksecker. What's going on, Mike?
Hey, good evening, guys.
How's it going,
Great
man?
to talk to you tonight.
Absolutely. Appreciate you coming on. We're looking forward to this.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hope I don't sound too dumb. I'm gonna throw that out there right now.
It'll be fun.
Shelley is our
with Travels Through Time that I really tried to do because it's a subject when you get into time travel where you know there's a lot of physics and science and all that, and yeah, the book has a lot of science in it, but I tried to not make it too sciencey. And on the flip side, there's a lot of metaphysics in it. I tried to not make it too metaphysical. I tried, to have a nice blend in there so, everybody could kind of understand what in the world I'm talking about.
Yeah, I really like that about the book, actually, because you do a really good job of blending. You explain the breakdown behind what you're talking about, and then you give examples in the paranormal world, and then you present the science behind it. And it's really interesting and such a fascinating book to read.
Thank you.
That was something that I did like was the fact that you gave stories to explain every theory you were putting out there, and I got real deep into the stories, and I was like, okay, that's back in that. The stories are great in it, though, so I am very excited to hear a little bit more about this book. And you are and have been on some of my absolute favorite shows, Ancient Alien, Unexplained, Fright Club. Yes, my favorites.
There's a few of those coming up. And in fact, next week, the December 15th, I'll be on another episode of The Unexplained. We're talking strange stories of World War II. So don't miss that one.
Ooh, okay. You heard it here first. Yes.
So
Yes.
what got you, I wouldn't say into this, but to building this whole theory? Well, I mean, yeah, I guess you could say into this, but what got you into building the theory and the concepts behind this book? What happened to bring all this about?
Yeah, well, I mean, a couple different things. For one, when it comes to the paranormal side of things, I am an experiencer. I've had experiences with shadow people dating all the way back to when I was a young kid, 8 years old. That one particular incident, it was very harrowing, at that age. It was kind of a one-off in that house. But then when we moved to another house, I started having more frequent shadow person experiences. And so it was a area that I was always intrigued, wanted to know more information about. Had my first little paranormal investigation, no idea what I was doing when I was like 14, 15 years old. And I knew then that, okay, this is really fascinating. This is something that I'm going to be involved with the rest of my life, not knowing what in the world that was, because we're talking like 1989, there were no ghost shows. There were paranormal investigators, like, Hans Holzer was still around and people like that, but it wasn't really a thing like it is now. So I didn't know what that was going to look like, except that I was very, very interested. And then as far as time travel, that is something, okay, grew up in the 80s back during, Back to the Future. So that was,
of course,
as far as pop culture, that was, the thing that was really fun with time travel. But to actually kind of intellectually think about, okay, what would real time travel look like? It was the movie Somewhere in Time starring Christopher Reeve and Jane Seymour back in 1980. Absolutely loved that movie as a kid. And even though at its core, it's a romance movie, the aspect of time travel that is introduced by Richard Matheson, the writer, to me seems more of what time travel would really look like. And so,
Mhm.
throughout my career as a paranormal investigator, researcher, and later on as, writer and filmmaker and all that sort of thing, um, I started to see a lot of similarities between what we were witnessing on a paranormal investigation or some other different situations and what may actually be some sort of time related event. And so that's where I really started diving into that area of research.
Hmm. Okay.
Right,
So
I'm
you
gonna let-
like those two?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
I know Ryan's itching for some questions, and so I'm gonna turn it to him real quick. Let him get one
Sure.
in.
So, what does time travel look like to you?
Time travel to me, we actually see it on occasion, and we don't really know that we're actually seeing it. When we talk about on a paranormal investigation, right? If we witness some sort of phenomenon going on, maybe it's a apparition or something like that. It may actually be some sort of time slip incident. Some of these shadow entities that we witness may be some sort of time related incident. When we are asleep and we're dreaming and we have some sort of premonition, a week later, we're like, I just had a dream about that. That is a time related event. It is related to time travel. But to actually consciously be able to travel through time, I think is, less than it's not going to be a machine. It's not going to be a DeLorean and a flux capacitor. It's not going to be
Dang it.
that. It's going to be more with the consciousness and willing your consciousness to
Yeah.
another point in time.
Okay. So I know in the book you talked about the stacked time theory. Can you
Yeah.
go into that a little bit more and explain to our listeners what that is?
I loved, by the way, before you
Yes.
get into this, I absolutely loved this theory.
Yeah.
I loved reading about it. I love the way that you built the picture and talked about it in the book. I think it's fantastic.
Thanks.
Sorry.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And so to understand what stacked time theory is, you kind of have to talk about, okay, what is time? And time is really it's a human construct. It's just really something that we've developed to keep track of our reality. How do we know when to plant the crops and keep track of the seasons, when to show up at work at the right moments so our bosses don't get upset, that sort of thing. When do we show up for the bus? So it's a time where it's a record keeping thing. This is what we call time, but it doesn't actually really exist. So when we look at something like the river of time, and I do give a couple of different analogies, like with the river of time, which is kind of what we've related our experience to. Time would be the water in that, but it's not the water itself that's making the river flow. It's the banks that's holding it in. If you remove the banks, everything would spill out and be there and just be stagnant. You could kind of jump around at will in this large lake or pond that's there. So there's a control in place, whatever those banks are, that's the control to keep time for our reality moving. So once we go down into, so we're talking about our experience here in the fourth dimension is what it really is. That's what time is our experience in the fourth dimension. Is where our consciousness resides. Which is a very fascinating thing because our consciousness, which is on the fourth dimension, is inside a three-dimensional body, which makes us multidimensional beings. So that's a cool thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
why did I never put two and two together? Good point.
So, yeah, exactly. So, our theoretical physics to this point has come up with this idea that we have up to 11 hyperspatial dimensions, starting with 0 and going up to 10. That means that there are other dimensions that are above us, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so forth. Now, like we see from our dimension, the fourth dimension, we see a three-dimensional object, as it's a whole thing. Two-dimensional objects, one dimension, which is a line. We see everything below us, not a problem. It's that stuff above us we have a hard time with, that we don't have the geometry to be able to see that. But those dimensions can see all of us, which means they see time as whole, as concurrent. They can move in and out of it at will. We, call those generally interdimensional beings. So that means all time is concurrent. It's all whole. It's all there. And what I related to when I call it stacked time theory, take where you're sitting right now.
Mhm.
And every moment that has happened, is happening, and will happen are all stacked up on top of each other. Each moment like a photograph in this large stack of photos. And real time travel would be the ability to move from one of those moments in the stack to the other. Now, everything's frequency, resonance, vibration. Sometimes two of those moments will resonate at the same frequency for just a brief moment, and we'll get a glimpse of another. And so that's what we would call like a time slip, when two of those moments bleed into each other like that. And that might be what some of our goes, hauntings, these sorts of things actually are.
Right.
Would that be like a doppelganger? Like whenever someone says, "Oh, someone saw me," would you say that's when those two moments in time are meeting? Because let me dumb it down for me. The way it sounds like it's a bunch of you made the analogy of a photograph.
Mhm.
That to me sounds like a flip book, and you can go backwards, forwards in the flip
Yeah.
book, to see where these moments are. And sometimes the pages get stuck together, is what it sounds like. If I'm dumbing it down
Yeah.
so I understand it. And suddenly
Yeah.
you've got two pages showing at the same time.
Yeah. Flip
That-
book is another great way to look at it. So take
Mhm.
two of those, two of those moments in the flip book and, bring them together. So yeah, doppelganger incident. Now doppelganger is just a German word that means double walker.
Right.
And, over the centuries, there's been a lot of legend and lore put on top of that. But basically, they were, witnessing another version of themselves at some point, or somebody would see two of the same person. And so that's where this came about. But then you have all this legend and lore thrown on top of, like it's some sort of entity that's mimicking you, or it's an evil twin, and all this stuff. But when you actually look at a lot of these incidents, just throw into Google, top doppelganger stories. And one of my favorite ones is that of the famous German poet Goethe. Now, he actually told this story himself in his book Dichtung und Wahrheit, or Poetry and Truth in English. Now, one day he's walking down the road, headed toward Drosselheim. He's having an affair with a young woman there, and he's kind of lost in his thoughts, kind of zoning out, like we would call it these days. And all of a sudden, on the other side of the road, he notices this man in a gold trim gray suit. Turns to get a better look at the guy, and all of a sudden, he disappears. It's like, whoa, what the heck was that? What happened there? Of course, he can't do anything about it. The guy totally disappeared on him. So, he notes it as a fascinating event and carries on his way. Well, a couple of years later, he's headed down the same road from Drosselheim, headed, I can't tell. I don't know if it was southeast, northwest, whatever it was. He's headed back down the road in the opposite direction. And he's coming across that same spot where he had the previous incident. And all of a sudden he looks down and he's like, oh my gosh, I was the guy in the gold trim gray suit, because I'm actually wearing it right now. So he had actually seen himself at two different moments in time. So the question is, what was the catalyst? How did
Right.
that actually happen? And so what I think happened here was when he was lost in his thoughts, when he was zoning out. Like we do the same thing today, right? We're driving down the road and, we're zoning out, lost in our thoughts, whatever. And we miss our turn. We miss our exit. Oh man, I go back and, retrace our steps and turn down that way. Well, it's a type of meditative state that we're
Right.
in. It's not a strong meditative state. Otherwise, you'd probably be crashing the car or whatever, but it's still a type of meditative state. Enough so that I believe in that little bit of a meditative state, he was able to tune into his own energy at that location at another point in the stack of time. And he notices this guy. Once he turned to get a better look at him, his concentration kind of broke there. Boom, it took him out of that meditative state, and the gentleman seemingly disappeared. But really, it was just he was no longer tuning in because he had broken out of that state.
that was because so I've actually covered doppelgangers on the podcast before, and so I love that you actually told that story because that's one of the stories just based on a lot of time I didn't cover on our episode. So that's I think the first time these two may have. I don't know if y'all read it before.
I had not heard that one before. No.
Yeah. And so that when I was reading that story in the book, it led me to start thinking, paranormal investigator wise, I was like, wait a minute. So are we essentially haunting ourselves?
We could be, yeah.
Because that's a whole different way of thinking about it. We've asked that question before. Are we are we haunting ourselves? But that puts it on a whole nother level.
Well, and I gave the example in the book at Johnny V's in Muskogee, Oklahoma. It was, and I've been writing about this event for years as a shadow incident, and I used it in my book, A Walk in the Shadows, to talk about interdimensional beings and how some of these things that we are experiencing as shadows are something that's actually interdimensional. Well, traveling through time or a time incident is related to dimensional activities. So, okay, we see this shadow, or I see this shadow darting across the kitchen. We all hear the bang of it into the door. The door doesn't move, although we heard the bang, all that crazy stuff going on. Now, I believe that on this being's plane of existence, it had seen me in some form, whether it was a shadow, whether it was a ghost, as something, got frightened, ran through the door, and I believe on its dimension and its plane of existence, its maybe moment in time, blew right through that door and ran out into the dining room. Now, what if that incident was 5-10 years beforehand and became one of the stories that helped to define this as a haunted location, and that's why we were there investigating that day? So did we when was that investigation? 2010, 2011? So were we the cause of why we were investigating there because we spooked somebody from 10 years prior?
Ryan's geeking out. Ryan is geeking out right now.
I mean, this is stuff I've been talking about for quite some time on the podcast.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to go back to something you said earlier. You said that we're kind of multidimensional beings ourselves because we exist on the third dimensional plane, but we're kind of tethered to the fourth dimension. Do you think we're able to perceive these other entities in our dimension because we are tethered to the fourth?
Yeah, the thing is that we can see them, we can witness them, but we don't quite understand what we're seeing sometimes because they, in their dimension, have a different physicality to themselves. So, there's the idea of, let's bring it down to dimensions that we understand, second and third dimension. So you take the second dimension, which is just really a flat plane, right? Almost like a piece of paper. Now, somebody that you could call a flatlander living within that particular dimension can't perceive a third dimensional object, right? So let's say a sphere is dropping down into that particular dimension. They wouldn't see that whole ball. They wouldn't see the whole sphere. What they would see in their dimension is all of a sudden it would start as like a dot and it would expand out to a circle until it reached, its apex. If the sphere is kind of like dropping through it, would expand out to its apex, and then as it continued through, it would shrink back down to a small circle and then a dot. And that's all they would see is this circle, basically getting bigger and then smaller because they don't have the capabilities in their dimension to see the third dimensional object. And so I believe that's what's happening here with a lot of things that we are experiencing. We're seeing, whether it's a shadow, sometimes people see like a shimmer type person or all these other different types of beings. And sometimes they see them in some really weird and strange ways. And I think that's because we're seeing something from another dimension. We just don't have the physicality. We don't have that type of geometry to be able to see it in its proper form.
Okay. That makes a whole lot of sense. So another question that I have then is, if, we know there are haunted locations and there are locations across the face of the earth where I guess the environment is more conducive for things like this. Can these sort of things happen anywhere, or do you have to go somewhere where they're more likely to happen?
Yeah, they can happen anywhere. Okay. It's just you go to locations that have higher percentages. So
Hmm.
if you go to a energetic hotspot, take like the Alaska Triangle, Sedona, these kind of energy vortex type areas, they're more prone to this type of activity. It doesn't mean it can't happen. Like I'm in the Cleveland, Ohio area. We have stuff that happens around here, but it's not considered a general hotspot. So, I mean, basically, what's happening here with these different hotspots. I'll talk about this in the Alaska's Mysterious Triangle. At Earth's core, right? It's molten iron. It's spinning. It's creating a magnetic field, which is a good thing because it protects us from the solar flares that bombard our planet, which was really helpful the other day when we got hit with that mass coronal ejection. I mean, we would have all been fried if we didn't have our magnetic shield.
Right.
So we got to see some wonderful auroras, though.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. But as it's passing through the Earth, it's interacting with different metals and minerals and these sorts of things. And depending on what it interacts with, it creates different electromagnetic fields. So these energetic hotspots that we have on Earth like this, they have some large concentration of some sort of mineral or metal within the ground in conjunction with the magnetism that's rising through the Earth that's creating these fantastic areas where these things can happen a lot more often.
That makes sense. And we've actually got people in the comments that are that just put that in right before you wrap that up about geological densities in the Earth core. I think that is fascinating. So I guess no, I answered my own question on that. Never mind. We're good.
We're done. All right. Well,
no.
So actually, I do have a question. In your book, you talk about the reason why some people can see like the shadows, because I always kind of go back to the paranormal. Why some people can see these shadow figures and some people can't. And one of the things that caught my eye was you had drawn the picture and the diagram of your eye. But some might be based on the rods and cones in your eyes and your depth perception. But also, you mentioned something about the frequencies. Depending on what frequency you're vibrating at. Now, something that we always talk about is that Ryan and I a lot of times will spot a shadow, something running across, or might be standing there, and we'll be going, Blake, can't you see it? And Blake will be like, no, I don't see it. And we're going, how do you not see it?
It's right there.
But, it's like, it's right there. So do you think but in all fairness, Blake wears contacts. Neither Ryan nor I do. So I was curious, do you think that it lends more to your eye specifically, or is it more, do you think what frequency you're vibrating at as to what you can see and what you can't?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of both. We each have a different, a little bit of a different physiology. So that can certainly play into it. But I do believe in the idea of, well, I don't have to say I believe in this. It is absolutely true that everybody resonates at a little bit of a different frequency. The human bodily resonance is anywhere from 9 to 16 hertz. Everybody's a little bit different. So that kind of leads to this idea that we're all going to experience our reality a little bit differently as we are tuning into these different energies that are around us. So that's a great example that you gave there, and I'll give one myself. So we were running a paranormal investigation at Mineral Springs Hotel in Alton, Illinois. We had held a small paracon there and running some investigations afterward, and it was really right toward the end of this particular investigation. Just a handful of us left, and we're upstairs in the abandoned part of the hotel in what's known as Pearl's room. It was a confirmed suicide, a lot of activity in that room. But as we're doing an EVP session in that room, all of a sudden we start hearing some noises from down the hall. So I head out there, looking down the hallway, and all of a sudden you start seeing this shadow smoke. Well, it looked like smoke at first. That comes rolling down the hallway. So what the heck's going on? Is there a fire or something? You don't smell anything. But this smoke starts to do something really, really interesting. It starts to like creep up the wall on the right-hand side of the hall and creep back down, creep back up, creep back down. All the while it's coming closer and closer and closer. And finally, one of those times that it crept up that wall, it morphed into the apparition of a little girl. And so then we start beckoning her to come closer. And she only got as far as this one particular doorway in which that room there was the story of, a spirit of a little girl there. And there was all kinds of toys and stuffed teddy bears and things like that in that room to use as trigger objects. And, I had investigated that hotel many, many times, had never had an experience with this little girl, had been in that room many times, nothing. There are other hot spots up there, but finally we're seeing this little girl, 5 of us, but we all saw her a little bit differently. So I saw her like fully formed from her head down to about her knees, and then she dissipated away. Other people saw it in kind of a more opposite manner, like fully formed at her feet on up, and then like at her head was dissipating away. And I believe that's because, again, we do all resonate at a little bit of a different frequency, as well as the entity itself has its own personal frequency, resonance, and vibration. And so, what are you tuning into? What are you able to tune into? So I think that's why we all saw her a little bit differently, was because it just mattered how your resonance was tuning in with hers.
Do you think they present themselves as how they want to be seen, depending on the frequency of the person observing them?
Yeah, I know a lot of people believe that. It's hard to really know, right? I mean, we just we saw shadow smoke. For one, this is a great story in saying, yeah, some of these shadows are actually these ghosts or entities or spirits or that sort of thing. It's trying to wrap your head around, okay, was she purposefully in shadow form and then decided, oh, here's people in the hallway, I'm going to magically poof out of this shadow smoke into full apparition? I don't know. Or was she just always there, maybe saw us in some form, got interested, and so her resonance shifted a little bit so that we could see it. Like we talked earlier about Goethe kind of tuning into his own frequency, like his frequency recognized and got to see a glimpse of it. So did her frequency, it might have been like something unconscious to her that, not this, this idea that, oh, I feel a vibration. I feel a tremor in the force that's close to mine. I'm going to tune into it. Right. It might just even be unconscious on her end, kind of curious, I do feel something. Let me go and check out what's there. And then maybe, on the subconscious level, that we were able to kind of tune into each other a little bit there.
So, okay, do you think it's possible then that maybe she exists in that shadow smoke form in the 4th dimension and was able to present herself in a way that we could perceive her and understand what we're looking at? Does that make sense? I don't know. I'm trying to think of the best way to...
You saying she's a shapeshifter?
No. I'm saying like
shift to be seen.
What I'm saying is what if on the 4th dimension that smoke that you were seeing is, I don't know, like a celestial body, I guess would be the best way to describe it. Do you know what I'm saying?
I think I kind of understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
So again, I'll go back to when we were talking about the geometry. What can our eyes actually perceive? What can our senses perceive out of that? She's on another dimensional plane for us. From us, we're only going to get some glimpses of what that actually is. So, she may have shifted from one dimension to another there, in that where she was coming down from 5, 6, 7, wherever it was, that gaseous smoke form could have been that transition from one dimension to another. And then when she entered more into ours, we got a much better glimpse of her.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was trying to say. So
I was gonna say, I think that's where you were going with that.
Yeah, that's where I was going.
I know Shelley brought up whenever we were talking about, when we were first reading your book, just starting out, and we got to certain chapters, we would call and talk to each other about things. And I know Shelley had a really good question about being able to change the frequency. Shelley, do you remember that question? Or
my question was do other people around you change your vibration up or down, or is it something you can change at will? Like, people talk all the time about being able to flip a switch. Like, I walk in and I might be in a terrible mood, but when I walk into this room around my friends, I'm going to flip that switch. A smile's going to be on my face, and I'm going to up my attitude, up my energy output. Do you think that is something you can just switch on and off, or do you think that it's something that you basically vibrate at all the time, and can other people affect whether your vibration's raised or lowered?
Yeah. Okay. Going back to, we all resonate at a different frequency. Well, our personal resonance is not always constant either. So it's like, my personal resonance might be 10 on that 9 to 16 scale, but it's not always going to be exactly 10. There might be some days where I'm like a 9.2, or other days where I'm a 11.7 or even higher, right? I think we have a tendency to, like in a kind of basic state of being where we're not, really thinking, we might hover around a certain range. But I do believe that that we can consciously shift, and we may even be able to. Well, I mean, this is what, like when people go through, whether it's self-improvement or whatever, and they kind of, change their state of being. And so that is a shift in your resonance and frequency. So I believe you can do that. Where was I going with that?
I don't know. You're
But
the
yeah,
expert.
I'm kind of answering. Yes, I believe that you can. That yes, you can actually do that. And we, the whole idea of tuning into something, right? Some of these things come in and out of our plane of existence. We get a glimpse of them, and I think that's because we're catching it, that it's at our frequency or at our resonance for just a moment, of wherever we are at. The trick is when we're talking about like time travel or trying to consciously see some of these things, how do we consciously adjust to a specific frequency to get on that wavelength to be able to see and experience more of these things, and to be able to do it at will and constantly. When we're talking, okay, a time slip, okay, great. Our personal resonance and the the frequency of our moment in time and the frequency of that moment in time, it all kind of cohesively came together at once. You're talking three different things here. So how do you make that happen for an extended period of time? So it's not just a chance slip, but that you can actually be there for several minutes, several hours, and be able to actually experience another moment in time for a long duration. That's a challenge.
Well, and that's something that we've brought up several times on the podcast and talked about in phone calls just within ourselves, because we've each experienced different things. I want to kind of gear it towards this missing time inside the sphere, inside the bubble, where things tend to happen. It feels like so much longer, but you come out and it's shorter, or vice
Right.
versa. It happens in 30 seconds, but you've been, an hour in this bubble. I believe I've had somewhat of a personal experience with this phenomena of being physically, I guess, attacked, I guess you could say, in my bed at night, being almost physically fully drug out of the bed after an investigation where I believe something came home with me. And when I woke up, I mean, it was blood curdling screams, because I was having a very surreal dream, and I was, being hurt in the dream. So I'm blood curdling screaming, and I'm down in the bed. Well, when the light finally came back in the room, and I sleep with the TV on, it was pitch black when I woke up, and it finally illuminated the room again. I got out of the bed and ran into the other portion of the house. I'm not gonna lie, I was frightened. And I asked the other person here, I was like, "Did you not just hear me blood curdling screams?" They're like, "Didn't hear anything." And I was like, "What?" And so that really got us talking about the sphere, about how we
Right.
experience things possibly in this sphere. So what are your thoughts on this? Obviously we know what you read in the book, but I'd love for you to kind of expand on what your thoughts of the sphere is and the experience.
The sphere of influence, or people talk about being in a bubble, or even some of these stories of being taken somewhere by some other entity, whether that's an ET, or 150 years ago they talked about being taken into the fairy realm, that sort of thing. And I think it's really something from another dimension, or a location from another dimension has bled into ours, and we're able to traverse in there. So, okay, not hearing the blood curdling scream that you're trapped in this bubble, it's almost like you're in that other dimension for a moment. So therefore, what our dimension experiences from that, sometimes they don't hear anything. Time works differently. They
Yeah.
may not even see you. They may hear you and not see you. That can happen too. So you have some different strange effects that are going on when you're in that kind of quote unquote sphere of influence.
I like the example that you use in the book talking about Rendlesham Forest with
Yeah.
Penniston being close to the
Mm-hmm.
craft
Mhm.
and his two compatriots being on the outside of the circle, like they're
Mhm.
frozen in time and he's able to move around and make
Right.
notes
Yeah.
and all of that. So going into that question, going into that subject, the question I have for you is, do you think you were talking about the fairy realm and talking about
Mhm.
and extraterrestrials and all? Do you think that those are the same thing that is happening and we're just looking at it through a different cultural lens?
Jacques Vallée believes so.
Yeah.
He's done a lot of work on that Passport to Magonia, and
Mhm.
I've of course dove into some of that research as well.
Mhm.
Um, if not the same thing, I mean, related somehow.
Mhm.
Mhm.
What? Sure. What they thought as fairies could very well be our ETs today. I think we're talking though about a number of different beings. Like I do believe that there's certainly other beings and intelligent life forms living on other planets in this universe.
Mhm.
That's just
Right.
mathematically, yes, it does. It does happen. They do exist.
Yeah.
Have some of them come to our planet in physical craft? Maybe. We're hearing these stories now of, well, we have, you know, s- we have the crashed, the crashed craft. That's almost a tongue twister.
Debris. Debris.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The
But we've
debris.
been hearing about that since Roswell
Oh.
too. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I believe that there are ones that are physically coming here that have nothing to do with interdimensional travel, unless, well, maybe they used an Einstein-Rosen bridge to get here, because the idea of Newtonian physics across the universe taking these thousands of years, I mean,
Mhm.
Mhm.
millions, seems a little much. But yeah, I think some of them are physically here, but I believe others are some sort of interdimensional being, or even like what we'd call an ultra terrestrial, so something that's indigenous here to Earth that we don't normally see with our own eyes.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, there's a lot of different ways that we can look at those beings.
That's a really
Yeah.
interesting question, Ryan. A shift with the cultural.
Yeah. If you were a betting man and you had to say, would you say that what most people are experiencing when they experience extraterrestrials are things that are already here, or they're things from other planets or other dimensions? What would you say? And that's a
Yeah,
tough
it's
question.
so to me, it comes down to percentages, because I believe it's a
Mhm.
little bit of everything. Because
Okay.
there's even an idea that, some of these ETs are actually ourselves time travelers from another point in time. I believe
Mhm.
it's a little bit of each. Now the question is, what are they more of?
Right.
Maybe more of them are interdimensional than say, physically, because it stands to reason that'd be a lot easier to travel from one dimension to another, especially ones that are, higher dimensional planes than us, that have the ability to kind of move about at will in our dimension.
Right.
Mhm.
So it stands to reason there's a higher percentage of those than ones that have physically traveled the universe.
Okay.
So,
Um.
oh, I'm sorry.
Oh no.
Go
No.
ahead,
Go ahead,
Ryan.
Shelley.
Oh, I'm sure your question is probably way smarter than mine is.
No. Go ahead. Please go
You're
ahead.
Now,
good.
my question is going along with the thought of, are they are they extraterrestrials? Are they ultra terrestrials? I mean, because I'm still fascinated by the frequency thing,
Mhm.
because we have witnessed someone literally stand outside and I guess adjust her frequency, and suddenly we begin to see the lights in the sky. Do you think that there are some people that are already prone to extraterrestrial encounters, already prone to be experiencers? Or do you think that they adjust their frequency up, or their frequency is somehow elevated to be able to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think some people are it's going to be easier for some people. Like, we can all swing a baseball bat and, probably hit a ball. Now, are we all going to make the major leagues? Not so many of us. So I think that there are, people, I think we can all do it to some degree, but I think
Mhm.
there are some people in this world that it's much, much easier for them. So you'll have somebody go, oh yeah, I'm just going to go outside and adjust and they know how to do it. It just comes very, very natural to them, where other people it's going to be very, very difficult. Now that frequency, what does that look like to somebody in another dimension? Maybe they see that as like a beacon and they're like, oh, okay, somebody is down there trying to signal us. Let's check out, see what's going on. That might be what it looks like to them.
Do you think there are people who have a resting frequency that are more predisposed to attract these entities from other dimensions than others?
Yeah, kind of the same thing. Just whatever that frequency is that gets noticed by those beings. There's probably people that are kind of more naturally in that state, where others it's going to be some work to get to that point. Yeah.
Okay.
So
okay, I'm sorry. I was still stuck on frequencies. I'm going to ask my one more frequency question, if
Go
that's
for it.
okay.
No, go
Right
for
at
it.
the right at the beginning, you had said something about the deja vu, like the dreams and then experiencing it, and that is like actually you're seeing a moment in time that you somehow got to see earlier. Is that that particular thing is always something that number one, it scares me. Number two, it fascinates me. I have a lot of deja vu. Does that mean that whenever you go to sleep, that sometimes your frequency can elevate to allow you to kind of get that glimpse into time?
Yeah, we enter into different brainwave states while we are asleep, and so while you're in some of those different states, your consciousness is resonating at different frequencies as you're moving through that. So sometimes you will. It's really like a form of time travel when you get those premonitions, when you have those premonitory dreams, and you're getting a glimpse of some other moment in time, and you come back and you're like, oh, that was an interesting dream, and all of a sudden, a day, a week, a month later, whatever it is, the whole event plays out right in front of you. Like, oh my gosh. So basically, you had a type of time travel incident. Other times when it's deja vu, you have to think, when we're dreaming, we don't always remember it when we wake. We might remember some fragments. How many times have we gone to tell a friend or a loved one a story about, oh, I had this, crazy dream last night, and you go to tell it, and even though you saw it so vividly in your mind, you only get out like 3 little moments that happened in the dream. You're like, but there was something else there too. What was it? So you start to lose it, and so sometimes, we forget the whole dream, but there's like some little fragment that hangs out in there from whatever that was. And then all of a sudden we experience that. And you're like, this is really familiar. So it seems like a deja vu moment, but really it was a piece of that travel that we had while we were dreaming. Now, some other deja vu moments, again, we're talking, stacked time. Everything is whole. Everything is concurrent. If you believe in reincarnation and that we have lived multiple lives, well, if all time is concurrent, that means all of those past lives and future lives are all here concurrently. So if you had a past life or a future life where you're visiting this particular room, building, whatever, and you happen to be there at that same location, it could be like a deja vu moment to you because you're actually also there, just in another life.
That hurts my brain. No,
Mind blown.
it gets so mind boggling at that point to stop.
I actually,
That's a lot of layers.
I love that.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
I
the
actually,
layers behind it. That's the thing.
I
That's
love that.
mind-boggling about
I
it.
need to. My flip book needs to quit going back and forth while I sleep. I need to just rest.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Well, and that's like
I think
when we were
that's
talking before about haunting ourselves. It's like, yeah,
Right.
So what are your thoughts on past life regression? And if you are with that, do you think that's why it works because of the stacked time theory?
Yeah, that could very well be. I've had past life regressions before. I've done hypnosis, and it's really truly fascinating when you get to experience that, when you get to see that. And so, yeah, it may very well be easier for you because of the fact that it's just a matter of tuning into that particular frequency.
So I'm gonna flip the script real quick because I've been watching the comments roll in, and I actually just one caught my eye, and I'm not sure if I've ever heard of anything like this, and they're asking you, Mike, if you've heard anything about your research. They said they had an experience at the building a couple of weeks ago. This is a haunted location. During an Estes method, the person speaking, the person under, said that they had the people speaking to them had white eyes, and when asked how they see us, they said binary code, essentially 1 zeros and X's. Is that something you come across in your research? And
So they're almost seeing us like the Matrix. I mean, I believe it simulation theory. I don't believe that it's necessarily a computer. I think we've related it to that because that's, well, it's, you know, the highest form of technology that we have right now. Of course, the Matrix movies, all that sort of thing. I think you know, the technology behind the simulation is far, far more advanced than, you know, we can currently comprehend. It's probably more like organic, biological in nature than a computer. We just don't quite get it yet. Just and I do talk about that in the book, and I use an example with Tesla, in that, you know, the different things that he talked about, you know, 130 years ago, we're talking like 1890s, you know, it was basically like drone technology, artificial intelligence. He talked about building an automaton of himself that could respond like him, talk like him, you know, all that sort of stuff. You know, he's talking about a robot with AI, but in his mind, that technology was gears, wheels, radio waves, you know, that sort of thing. The silicon microchip hadn't been invented in his lifetime.
right.
So he didn't know that that was what the technology was going to be. But we have it now. So I think that's kind of the same with us, is that, you know, that yes, it's a simulation, but I don't think we quite understand the technology behind that. You know, somebody seen, you know, ones and zeros. Yeah, it's interesting. When I've gone under hypnosis, like we talked about before, we actually channeled the entity that had visited me when I was 8 years old in my room, and I got frightened of the thing. You know, I thought it was a shadow person at the time. And, you know, looking from that being's perspective, it didn't know that I could even see it until I reacted to it. And I actually got to see the perspective from the being. But in that, it still looked, you know, it still looked like a regular vision to me. You know, so is that really what the being itself saw, or were they just giving me a vision of, you know, what I could perceive?
Right.
We kind of don't know. You know, it's, you know, all these different beings, and they all live organically somewhere, somehow. So, you know, their eyes probably work differently. Their physiology is going to be a bit different. We know that even just, you know, in our dimension, in our world, we know that our cats, dogs, birds, they all see things differently than us. Yeah.
Right.
I'm letting Ryan get a question in.
No,
you know, Ryan's got another one ready to go.
Yeah.
no, I was actually, I don't. I was waiting. I thought you had something to say, Blake.
No, I just reading that. That's
I'm into the stories.
That one, out of all the comments, that one really crossed my mind, or caught my eye, because I was like, 1 zeros X, you know, kind of that Matrix simulation like we were talking about. I don't think I've ever stumbled across anybody that I know.
I've never heard that
before.
like that.
Yeah, that was
That
the first
particular
as far as seeing
experience.
binary. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Well, except for the flash that Jim Peniston had in his mind.
Right.
right. The
nothing but
binary
code. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. I'm sorry, I'm still hung up on frequencies, you guys. I can't.
That was the one chapter that Shelley was just absolutely fascinated about. When we got on the phone call, I think we
wait a minute. What about this?
I think we spent 2 hours one night talking about different
Wow.
frequencies.
Yeah.
And Shelley, I'm actually gonna, because I don't know if you remember this question or not that you brought up, so I'll bring it up for you. It kind of lends into the whole dimension above, dimension below. What can they see? What can they not? You know, is it, Shelley, you asked me, and I was like, I don't know. This big question to ask him. Can it be the same thing with the frequency? So like with the shadows, the example we gave, they can see them sometimes, and I just can't. I'm like, I don't know what you're looking at. Is it something where if we're vibrating on a certain frequency, is everything that I guess resonates on a frequency below that is paranormal, a paranormal experience, we'd be able to use it, fall into that dimension idea that, you know, you're kind of getting to see the whole picture below
We're all
what
vibrating on a 7. Can we see everything 7 and below, but
There you
nothing
go.
8 and
Right.
above?
Yeah.
I'm like, there you
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
Let me dumb it
Yeah.
down. I think I could
Yeah,
dumb
there
it
you
down
go.
in my
Yeah, yeah.
question to you too.
So, okay. So we talk like paranormal, supernatural, that sort of thing. These are terms that we've given ourselves to describe things that we don't normally experience.
Mhm.
Mhm.
But in the grand scheme of the universe, all of it's normal, all of it's natural.
Right.
Yeah. So therefore, when whatever the frequency is yeah, not trying to be kind of saying, but it just is what it
No.
is. You know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
if it's a 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever it is. And okay, I'll go back to okay, I'm a 10, and maybe there's something in the room that's a 7 and something else that's 12. It doesn't mean that one's paranormal and one's not. It just means that's just the frequency that they're resonating at. Now,
Gotcha.
because mine is a little bit different, I'm going to see both of those a little bit differently than somebody else who's in the room with me who's
Gotcha.
maybe resonating at
Mhm.
11. They're going to see those a little bit differently than me.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's where
But if I'm on
we're-
an 8, I should be able to perceive everything in the room, just maybe
You're
differently
gonna
than
see it
somebody who's vibrating at a
differently.
9 or
Right.
10.
Right.
Right.
Just to
Yeah.
Okay.
differently than everybody else in the room, or you might not. So there's that too.
Well, crap, I'm
Like-
looking for answers here, Mike.
It just means like if Blake sees it and you don't, that just means he's resonating closer to that frequency than
Mhm.
you are.
Okay.
But he might see it like fully formed, and maybe you see it as kind of wispy or whatever, and he's like, "Oh man, you see that over there?" And you're like, I think I see a little bit of
know.
something,
Wow, he just blew my mind a little bit, because did we not just have that exact
We
conversation?
just had this
Right.
exact conversation.
That was weird that you said that, because I know that I'm just going to use the term paranormal because that's what we're used to and what our viewers will listen to. I know that paranormal occurrences are super rare, but
Mhm.
what got us to talking about that was recently I saw an
Mhm.
apparition in my house, and I'm talking full fledged. I could tell you the color, what it was wearing, and I know that those things are super rare to experience for a lot of people. But that was the fourth one I've seen in my entire lifetime. And we got to thinking about like shadow versus apparition, and that's what
Mhm.
led to that. So for you to bring up, that it's fully fledged, and you just kind of blew my mind there for a second. It's like a little
Yeah,
bit
and I
of
use-
deja vu.
Yeah, and I use that example all the time too. Shadow, the difference between shadows and apparitions.
Mhm.
And
Right.
some people are like, "Oh, you're seeing shadows because you're a lower vibrational person."
Mhm.
I think it's one of those, because I see more shadows than apparitions.
Mhm.
But I have seen apparitions. It doesn't mean that I don't ever.
Right.
I told the story a little while ago. I've seen the little girl, the apparition of a little girl morph out of shadow smoke. So I
Right.
saw them both to some degree. But again, everybody else that was with me saw it a little bit differently. So, okay, my personal resonance is more in tune to the shadows than apparitions. So if somebody walks into the room and they're giving off that resonance of a shadow, I'm probably going to pick up on it more, because my personal resonance kind of tunes into that. It's figured it out. And so when it
Yeah.
enters in the room, boom, I will usually see it. But things that are resonating more at like the apparition type level, not so much, because my personal resonance is not as in tune to it. But doesn't mean I
Okay.
won't ever see it. It's just
Right.
not as in tune. Yeah.
And so that's why some people never ever see anything. Right.
Yeah, because they're kind of unfortunately caught in the
Yeah.
middle there. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know Shelly's sitting over there. Her gears are turning. We're going to be talking
So-
about
yeah,
frequency for an hour
I mean,
after this
yeah,
is over. I know.
Yeah, 'cause
Yeah.
there are people that so desperately want to experience, but
Mhm.
maybe like you're saying that
Well, Yeah, and a woman that I used to investigate with quite a bit some years ago, which is an ex of mine. She, she had always wanted to experience something, and
Mhm.
she was like quite a while into her adulthood before she finally did. And
Mm-hmm.
when she did, it was like boom, the whole world suddenly opened up to her. It was like
Right.
her resonance finally like figured out it clicked, and whenever something, paranormal would kind of come into the room, all of a sudden she'd tune into it. So it was like it took the moment of it happening the first time for her body to figure out this is it.
So from then on out, was she more open to experiencing things
Oh
like
yeah,
that?
yeah.
Okay.
I think that's what's fascinating about all of this, because I tend to agree with you, Mike, on it's not really paranormal, supernatural, these words that we've put this connotation to. I think it's just once we figure it out and we tune into, and then it's just bam. I mean, it's here. That's kind of
Yeah.
how I feel about it. We
Mhm.
just don't have the technology to figure it out right now.
Yeah, and our society is we're starting to get more back into it, which is great.
Right.
But our society for a long, long time shunned it all.
Yeah.
But you look at the ancients, you look at a lot of the indigenous tribes and so forth, and yeah, they're more spiritual. They're having more of these experiences because
Mhm.
they were always opened up to it. They never did shun it. So therefore, their personal resonance, frequency, vibration was always more in tune to it.
Yeah.
Do you think that that is something you can teach yourself to do or to be better at? Because my thought is the example of Tibetan monks that are able to raise and lower their body temperatures at will. You can actually see them begin to glow with the amount of focus they put in, and they're actually changing their frequency. Can I learn how to do that? I might feel like vibrating on a
absolutely.
41 tomorrow. Much to their chagrin.
Yeah, that's definitely something I believe that you can learn, teach yourself, and all that.
Mhm.
As for some people, it's going to be easier. For some people, it's going to be a little bit more challenging. But it's a capability that we all have. Kind of like when I was talking earlier, anybody can pick up a baseball bat and swing it. It's just how much easier is it going to be for you to hit that ball all the time? Some people will pick it up immediately. Others, it's going to take a little while.
Need practice, maybe.
That's right. Practice.
So you were talking about how the ancients seem to be more in tune with that particular plane versus now. Do you think it's because of the amount of technological noise and electromagnetic fields that we have being produced by these electronic devices that are maybe changing frequencies and resonances, so people aren't as in tune to that anymore?
Well, I think it's a distraction is what it is. We're not outside as much anymore. We're inside, we're cooped up, we're in front of the computer or the TV and things like this all the time. We have a lot more things in our world distracting us from nature. And they were in it all the time. That was their world. So they were more, in tune to that, more in tune to the spiritual world. And for us, we have a billion more things going on today.
Do you think our natural ability to sense this has been disrupted by the output of things like cell phones, electronic devices that are now closer to us than we've ever kept them before?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. I told you I'm not going to get all the
right.
smart questions.
Well, I think that's
on the flip side, that's another way to look at all those different signals and waves kind of getting in the way. Well, maybe. How much of that stuff was, well, I mean, because there's, all of those are being broadcast on a variety of different waves and frequencies and all that. And of course, we can only see into a very narrow band of the spectrum. We can only hear certain wavelengths, all that sort of thing. How much of that? Because we know that we're getting a variety of different waves from space, right? That's astronomers are tuned into radio waves. We have radio antennas tuning into things from so that sort of stuff did exist to a degree. So did it interfere with the ancients? I guess I should say, is the fact that we have a lot more of that going on, is that affecting energy? I mean, it all does have an effect on the environment to some degree or another. The problem is in trying to say it has more of an effect. Well, there was nothing, or at least not that I know of. There wasn't anybody taking those readings and measurements back then to say, oh, this is we have free range to be able to do all these things because we don't have this, that, or the other thing going on. So to be able to compare it, we know we have more stuff going on, but it's hard to say.
Thank you for dumbing it down for me.
Yep.
Sorry if the questions got a little
No,
repetitive.
it's
there for you, Mike.
Yeah.
and I get the question. It's just
Yeah,
difficult
yeah.
to answer because
Right.
Right.
we don't know how, back then, how much of it
Yeah.
were they doing? We believe that
We
they were
don't have a
doing a lot of
basis
it.
of measurement.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. It's not quantifiable from
we-
back then. Yeah.
Well, and we've done things like done measurements around standing stones, like the rollright stones and things like this. And there are, measurable frequencies and waves throughout that, which, okay, it gives us an idea of what it may have been like. Because I think, these stones have been around for thousands of years. Some of them are missing. They're really weathered down. And to be able to get any frequency off of them at all is like, wow, this is fascinating. Well, how much stronger would they have been back then? So, okay, we're talking about cell phones and things like that, generating these waves and all that. Well, for them, even though they didn't have the cell phones, was it the standing stones that were generating similar waves? And how strong were they back then?
Right.
Yeah.
I love it.
I don't know how
I
strong
mean,
they were.
yeah.
I wish I did. That's fascinating.
Yeah, or like the pyramids. Like there's an experiment that was done a few years back. They published a paper that they've said we've been talking about it for years. The pyramids are harnessing the power of the earth. Great. Well, somebody actually ran an experiment and said yes. Energy can be contained within the Great Pyramid of Giza. Okay, awesome. How much, and the fact that the casing stones are gone, how much did that change how much energy could be held? Because if you put those casing stones back on, maybe a lot more could be held in there. And plus, whether or not you subscribe to Christopher Dunn's Giza power plant theory, it was certainly some sort of machine. There's physical evidence of it, vitrification of the stone, scorching of the stone, all this sort of stuff. So it was doing something, but we don't have a measurement, to really say it was doing this much. And how did that type of energy affect the people of the land? Yeah,
we don't really know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the book, man, was absolutely fascinating and is absolutely fascinating. I can't recommend it enough.
I was about to say, Mike, if you want to tell them where they can get because everything we talked about tonight, you mentioned in some way or another, some form or fashion inside your book. So where can they go and get a copy of it?
Yeah, absolutely. You can check out my website, MikeRicksecker.com. That has links to all my books, including Travels Through Time, my event schedules out there. All of that wonderful information.
I do have one question to ask you before you go.
We knew it was coming. Mike.
We knew it was going to happen.
Not necessarily pertaining to the book. As an investigator and a researcher, where is your favorite place to investigate?
Well, let's see. I have a couple of different favorites. I mentioned Mineral Springs Hotel in Alton, Illinois before. I absolutely love that building. It's truly fascinating. It's endeared me over the years. So that would be my favorite, I guess, historic building. Favorite haunted house is a Stone Lion Inn in Guthrie, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
We got to make it up there.
Yeah.
Yeah. To me, that's just it's the first time I ever went there. Pulled up and looking at it like, yeah, that's a haunted house. Just you step inside and it's just got this like cool. I call it creepy cool. So it got this creepy cool vibe. It's almost like you're hearing the voices on the air. The floorboards are creaking, and it was a mortuary at one point for a few years during the 30s. And the current owner, Becky Luker, when she bought the house in the 80s, and she and her family had lived in it for a while. She's in the kitchen, and she's cooking and baking on the table that's in there. Her son comes home from school one day, and she's like, "Mom, do you know what this house used to be?" And she didn't know it had been a mortuary at the time. And she's like, well, "No, what do you mean?" And he tells her this used as a funeral home was, and she looks down at the table that she's cooking on. It was the old embalming table.
Oh my God.
No, thank you. No, thank you.
So she has that She has that set up in the entrance hall right now. So, and what she'll do, like, because she'll do murder mystery dinner theaters and stuff
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
In addition to you can investigate and all that, but she will serve the drinks out on the embalming table.
Oh, that's so cool. I'm in.
I'm totally down for that.
She just serves them out of a thing that says embalming fluid.
Yeah, right. Pouring them up. Oh, that's fantastic.
That's
I thought
awesome.
you were going to tell me something, but as soon as you were like, she looked down at the table, I went, "Oh no."
Yeah, it's like, these cookies taste funny to you? No.
Yeah, right. Oh man.
I mean, there are 50 years between when it was
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
used and
Yeah, exactly. But still, it's just
still, it's a thought of it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, if you'll hang tight with us for just a second, we got a little housekeeping things to wrap up, do a close and sign off. We'll thank you property and we'll let you out of here.
So, all right. So, Blake, tell them everything they need to know then.
Absolutely. Well, don't forget that After Dark with EVP season 1 is all out now and available to stream on Paraflix Paranormal Plus. That's a total of 8 episodes of never before seen footage and brand new interviews. Tomorrow morning, we'll be posting up our link to our Facebook. So make sure you're going to go to the Everything Vaguely Paranormal Podcast Facebook page to find that. Our link tree is where you can go to find everything that has to do with EVP. That includes that Paraflix link, a link to our online merchandise store, our Patreon, our public investigations. Those are all the different ways you can help support the show and what we do. That support you give goes directly to the show and future endeavors. So make sure you check all of that out. And we greatly appreciate your love and support through those likes, shares, comments as well. So any stories that you have, as always, those can be sent to us at the evppod@gmail.com. That's THEEVPPOD@gmail.com.
Like, share, and subscribe.
Absolutely. Don't forget to go and check out MikeRicksecker.com, right, Mike?
Correct.
All right, for all thing Mike Ricksecker related. Events, books, all that.
They can also check out the Connected Universe portal, connecteduniverseportal.com. So that's like a whole online learning platform that I've put together.
Nice.
I wish I'd have
Okay.
found that first.
Shelly might have not had so many, kindergarten questions. I'm just kidding, Shelly.
It's fine. It was kindergarten questions, and I got hung up on frequencies, but I did whenever you and I were going through it too. So,
Yeah, you did. Well, y'all, thanks for joining us. Another weekly episode of Everything Vaguely Paranormal. For myself, I am Blake Smith. My partners in the paranormal, Miss Shelly Pruitt, Mr. Ryan Roberts, and our very special guest this week, Mr. Mike Ricksecker. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. We
Thank
do
you.
appreciate it. And as always, y'all, we will see you next Tuesday. Bye, y'all.
Bye, guys.